Thank you, everybody. We're gonna go and get started. I was at 1 o'clock, and as respect for everybody's schedule, we'll go ahead and get started on. We'll make a note that we do have a quorum. We have 6 members present. So we'll call to order. Let's see if flags. We'll go ahead and set the agenda first thing. So hopefully everybody has a draft agenda. So we have 2 points of 2 pieces of minutes that need to be approved, and the KCSO has several job descriptions they've asked to have reviewed. The consideration of the approval of Nova Medical Center as a board approved licensed physician for physical exams. Then we have 2 motions that are to be considered under old business. Is there anything that needs to be added or removed from the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second by Valiant. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Okay. First item, approval of minutes for the last board meeting. This is dated August 16th. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review those. I'll accept the motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve these. Second.
Motion by Valiant, second by Marshall. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, so moved. Second item is the approval of the subcommittee minutes from November 1st. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to review those. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Valiant, and then a second by Marshall. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, third item is the job descriptions. Do we have a representative? Chief, thank you. If you would call out the ones, sir, and then we'll have everybody.
First one will be Human Resources Director.
Thank you. You'll have to give us a minute to just get them.
Sure.
I apologize, we did receive these electronically.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I've read this before. Does anybody have any questions, Chief?
I have one.
Yeah.
What is the reason for moving this under merit?
For moving it.
Human Resources
The
Director.
change in the description itself is going from manager, obviously, to director. Some of the wording in here is going to change from supervises. The director is now going to be supervising the entire office instead of assisting in that matter, and oversees the hiring process instead of assisting in overseeing the hiring process. And also, probably most notably, education required is must have knowledge of ADA guidelines. That's a task in itself and pretty much a job on its own. So we're just moving that over to a director standpoint instead of a manager standpoint.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Out of curiosity, why is it a non-exempt position?
All of our positions are classified that way, and that just comes from upstairs with Knox County.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Marshall, and a second by Valiant. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved, thank you. Next, sir.
Second will be information and technology systems analyst.
Thank you. Any questions? Entertain a motion to approve
Make a motion to approve.
by Valiant. I need a second.
Second.
By Marshall. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thirdly will be property unit supervisor.
Thank you. Any questions regarding this? Entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Motion by Valiant, need a second.
Second.
Second by Marshall, any discussion?
Is there a reason for minimum of 5 years with the sheriff's office as opposed to potentially other requirements for time involved?
The 5 years for the unit supervisor, 15 is getting kind of hard to come by. We just don't have a lot of folks that are in the corrections division that are interested in this position or have been around for that long to take this position. Usually if you're there for 15 years, you've already got some established experience elsewhere within the facility. So,
I'm sorry, I guess my question was, do you think there's even a need for 5 years? Is that,
I don't know where the number came from. It's just the 5 years. Is there a need to even have it a 5 year?
The requirement was already there for 15, they just wanted to lower that requirement some to allow other individuals, because it is a supervisory role. So they wanted to allow for the people that were bidding on it, be eligible to bid on it with the 5-year requirement, but also have a little bit of experience within the department because it is a supervisory role.
sure.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the question. I'm sorry.
I don't know that I heard a second. I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Okay. Go ahead, thank you.
We're good? Okay. I'll restate it. All in favor of supporting this job description change, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next, sir.
Last will be education coordinator.
We actually have
I'm
two.
sorry, education coordinator and then education officer.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody have any questions from the chief?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Second? Aye.
I'll second.
Marshall, any discussion on this? Hearing none, call for the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Thank you.
And last will be the education officer.
Any questions, chief?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Marshall. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
There is a, this page right here, where does that go?
That is for E, for the approval of the note.
Okay,
It
so
is the next.
that's another part of that. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, so, that was very timely for the question. Next item on the agenda is let me restate it, consideration of approval of Nova Medical Center as a board-approved licensed physician for physical exam under regulations 6.1.3J. Could you identify yourself for the board?
Amanda Pitts, I'm the Human Resources Manager.
Thank you.
So as you all are aware, our new hires or our applicants have to have a physical before they can begin employment. Those physicals can only be done on Thursdays and Fridays. And sometimes we do not have a medical provider here on Fridays or Thursdays that can sign off on that. And so we have looked into possibly using Nova Healthcare. They will provide the same service for us. This is only when the merit system contacts the medical staff, the sheriff's office medical staff, and they're not going to have a provider on Friday or Thursday. So we will only be using Nova in those cases if we need to. This is the KCSO medical staff will still be conducting our physicals. This is only when we need to have a provider when their medical staff is not here. So, And this, we're still looking into this, but we wanted to make notification to the board that we are looking into using Nova as needed.
So there's no request for any type of movement on this, just a notification.
We're just making notification to you.
Anybody have any questions?
Has Nova agreed to respond
Yes.
accordingly?
Yes, so Nova has agreed to fill out our forms, do the same process that our current medical staff is doing. And again, we're not taking this away from our medical staff. It's only when our medical staff, there's not a provider here on Thursdays and Fridays that can sign off on it. And it just moves these people through the hiring process faster.
So Nova's agreed, and if they would
Yes.
respond, you'd have some type of contract with the
Yes.
sheriff's department.
Yes. Sheriff still wants to look at it to determine, he's still looking at it. But we wanted to make notification because we have reached out to them. They have agreed to do it. And we may not be meeting again until whenever you all decide to meet. So
So this, you're not asking us to vote to approve
Right.
Nova at this
we're
time.
just making notification to you that we are looking into this, and the sheriff is also looking at it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Are you considering anyone else other than Nova or just Nova?
Right now, just Nova, because they, we do the post-certification forms for our law enforcement. They've agreed to do that for us as well. So right now, we're just looking at Nova because they provide the same services that our medical staff is currently doing. So,
And just out of curiosity, because I'm not familiar with the process today, would they come here? Do you send
we will send them to Nova.
there?
I had a question. Will they do all the medical examinations just like they do
Yes,
through your office?
yes.
What about the psychological evaluations? Are they,
So that's done through Helen Ross McNabb, and there's no changes with Helen Ross McNabb. This is just for our physicals, our medical physicals.
I do have a question. So this will be something that you'll be bringing back after, so
Once
we're
the
not
sheriff
looking.
makes his decision,
Okay, so
yes.
it's not final yet. Okay, I misunderstood
Any
that. So
other,
I'm just-
any other questions? I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Why is it only on Thursdays and Fridays? I realize the internal function is based on staff availability at the facility.
It's only done on Thursdays and Fridays because our psychologicals can only be done on Thursdays and Fridays.
So you want to stack them.
Right, so we go off of what Helen Ross McNabb can do, and we just ask them to get their physicals on the same day that Helen Ross McNabb does the psychological as well. So they're getting it all done in that time frame.
And just to dovetail on your question, why didn't we consider doing a request for proposal with other medical to possibly get a competitive bidding on it to get a lower?
Probably because this is just going to be for those Thursdays and Fridays that our medical staff is not there. So we're not looking at sending a lot of people to get this done. This is only on those Thursdays and Fridays. And Paula, you can, as far as the availability of our medical staff, the merit system schedules those psychologicals, the physicals. And so there are times when they send over the schedule and our medical staff does not have a provider on those Thursdays and Fridays. This is the only time that we would be using Nova. So it's not going to be all the time, that big of an expense. So that may have been why they didn't want to get a contract.
What's the vacancy right now? The vacancy
The
number?
vacancy numbers for corrections,
Right.
patrol,
Yeah.
the vacancy numbers right now, we're looking at 30 corrections. We've got 23 corrections in the hiring process. And we've got about 7 offers that we can make currently.
Since the spring.
Patrol is a little bit different.
Okay.
We've got, I believe, 21 vacancies on patrol, and we've got 7 people in the hiring process currently for patrol.
And is your opinion, as the director, is your opinion that McNabb is the best provider, even though they only provide you 2-day window to have the test done?
Currently, just because of the MMPI,
Right.
and they have the MMPI lab, so
Right.
currently, yes, they
I
are.
mean, I'm intimately aware of the processes and I'm just used to doing
Right.
competitive bidding for.
Well, they also added another psychologist for us. So after the July pay increase went into effect, we saw an uptick in applications. And
Okay.
so Helen Ross McNabb did add another psychologist on staff for us
Great.
to help move these people through as quickly as we could.
Did the reduction in age help with that as well?
Yeah, it did. We've not seen a significant amount of 18-year-olds apply, but we have had 18-year-olds apply, and we actually have one that's working in corrections right now that's doing really well.
Good.
So,
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next item is two old business items. First one is the motion to propose amendment to Rules and Regs 3.2F and County Ordinance Section 42-53C. And since I don't have those committed to my own personal little database, that is the first motion that is regarding, and it's regarding the involvement by members of the merit council in political campaigns. So I will open it for discussion. If anybody wish to speak on that.
That's what we had our committee meeting about. And, we voted to present to the board to go ahead with this as had previously been written back in July. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So for clarification, that would be that we would be prohibited from participating in the election of the Knox County Sheriff.
Correct.
Specifically. And it would not include any other elected position, whether it be city, county, state, or federal, correct?
Yes, and then if a member of the merit board decided that they wanted to run for political office, they would have to step aside.
Was there a conversation about county commission contests and prohibiting merit council members from participating in those campaigns?
No, there wasn't. John and Clarence, we didn't discuss specifically county commission.
No.
Does anybody have an opinion on that? Okay, well, I do. The concern I have is they're the appointing body for us. The day after an election, if it plays out to where a member of the merit council has supported the opponent of a successful candidate, that's the concern with it bleeding into the room, the political outcomes bleed into the room. Whenever it's a local contest, I can understand state or federal contests where those elected persons do not have influence on the merit council or the county commission. But I would be very concerned. If we allowed merit council members to participate in local elections, we could have another situation where you've got merit council members wearing campaign hats and t-shirts and different things, doing different things that are reflecting on the potential lack of objectability in this room. I have a very strong concern for the outcome for the employees that we're supposed to not necessarily represent, but to ensure that there is an unbiased, apolitical filter for the work that's going on outside of this room. So that would be my concern regarding this motion. And I'm willing to hear anybody else if anybody else has an opinion on it.
Let me just add, I know during the subcommittee meeting, there was a friendly amendment to include local, so any local government or state. That's what the vote was about. The vote was to keep the language that was initially presented 2-1, but what I proposed was a friendly amendment to change the amendment from Knox County Sheriff election to local and state, and have that as kind of the regulations there as far as merit system board members.
I apologize. We do have one individual that made notice that they wish to address the council regarding this proposed amendment. So, Mr. Larson Jay, if you would like to come forward, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Sorry for being just a few minutes late, trying to get from one side of town to the other these days. It's a little bit difficult. You guys have heard my objections to this before. I'm the commissioner that wrote the ordinance and reformed several things within the merit system and championed, trying to make this a better system. And it comes from my time spending with officers, hearing their concerns. It wasn't solely me just trying to, do something different within government, but from hearing their concerns. And that the concerns the officers I talked to years and years and years ago started with one simple response. When I said, well, would you ever go to the merit system to file a grievance? And the response was, no way, I'm not in that camp. The perception that they had was, I'm not in that political camp. So there's no way I would go to the board that's supposed to serve me because I know it's biased. I know it's against me. And that's really the genesis for this. That is terrible. That's a terrible system in which an officer that this body is supposed to serve, in which I'm supposed to serve, thinks they can't get a fair shot because of politics. That's the entire reason to start this entire thing. And I asked again, and I asked again, and I asked again, and I have not gotten a good answer to what benefit to the officers is allowing more politics on this board. This is who we serve. These officers are who we serve, who you serve. And you serve on this board for their benefit. This organization exists because of their benefit. Not because of the sheriff, not because of commission, not because of anybody else, but because we need a system that says we protect you, no matter what. You have rights, and regardless of what the political winds, this is the core of what a merit system is. To make sure that if a new political regime comes in, that they don't clear house and say, sorry, you weren't for me, it's time to get your walking papers. That's the whole point of the merit system. Less politics. Do your job as an officer. Serve honorably. Help this community. And if there's something goes wrong, then you have a fair shake at a hearing and a making sure that somebody's looking after your back. That's the whole point of this. So to put more politics in it doesn't make sense to me. Tell me where anything over the last 2 years since these reforms have been put in has hindered your ability to support our officers because of politics, or the lack of politics in this case. And I can't find one. Now, I understand there are members of their board that want to be involved with political campaigns. They want to be involved in going out and helping people get elected. I find that honorable. Great. You don't have to serve on this board. You don't have to. This is a voluntary board that you chose to serve on, knowing that this rule was in place, knowing that you would serve the officers. And so I always go back to what is better for the officers? Putting more politics in it, more perception, more perceived, situation that they're going to walk into, or less, where it's black and white. Follow the rules. Be a good officer. We got your back. And so I would just encourage you not to pursue this and to leave it be. And if you want to go work on campaigns, great. But if Knox County Commission has the authority to change these rules and be the oversight for this board, and Knox County Commission has to codify this, the Knox County Commission has the ability to make other rules and have the authority to work on it. The goal is to work with you, not against you. And I would just say, do what's best for the officers, and you can't ever go wrong. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to address some of that. I think I've said a couple things. I think there seems to be some suggestion that political activity is only sinister, which I think is an incorrect assumption. I think by that token, Mr. Jay, whose entire existence on the county commission is due to his political activity. By that same token and that same suggestion, it would be that he's a sinister individual with only sinister motives, which I think would be a ridiculous proposition. The fact that being involved in local politics can only lead to sinister outcomes. And I think we've constantly heard the fringe example where an officer runs for an office and a board member could support, somebody else also running for that office. But the problem is that suggestion the suggestion continues to be that no board member could ever maintain any level of impartiality, I think, in those examples. And I think there are a lot of issues locally, just even with local positions across different local offices, where many of the officers wouldn't be qualified to run for those offices in the first place based off their qualifications. So for example, an officer can't run for Chancery Court judge because the officers don't have a law degree. They haven't had the time necessary, the prerequisites necessary to run for that position. And there are other examples like that throughout the county. I think on top of that, these rules weren't in place before this past year. So, and I think the problem is, we've implemented these new rules, but as I've said, I firmly don't believe the county commission ever had the legislative authority to pass that. So what we're talking about is, and what's continued to be brought up, is a public policy interest. The public policy interest being the political activities involved with this. Well, from that same standpoint, you can make the argument from a Second Amendment standpoint. How would anybody on the merit council owning a gun help the officers within the sheriff's department? By that same argument, it doesn't at all. Because how would gun ownership on this merit council provide any benefit to any officer in the service? And the answer is it doesn't. It really doesn't. But it also doesn't have a causal connection to that. Similarly, the free speech implications here don't really have any play towards that. So the problem is, I think it's been proposed that because under the Hatch Act, you can restrict the political activities of the employees, that there's an analogous implication, that there's an analogous situation here, and the county commission also has the power to regulate the activities of the board members. But unfortunately, the law is pretty clear, and there have been plenty of Supreme Court cases on it, and especially more recently as the Supreme Court continues to expand free speech rights and recognize free speech rights. I'm confident that that's not the case. And the Supreme Court standard is, and I quote, that the legislation needs to be, if it's involving an amendment, or if it's involving one of the constitutional rights, the legislation needs to be narrowly tailored to achieve the compelling interest behind the legislation. So, for example, the Hatch Act's purpose was to protect the employees from political pressures of the administration. Using the Hatch Act as an analogy for how the government can restrict constitutional rights is inappropriate because it is not narrowly tailored to achieve the compelling interest of the legislation. So, once again, the board members they're not employees. And so using the Hatch Act as an example and saying, well, the Hatch Act can restrict employees' activities, so we can restrict the board members' activities, is an inappropriate use of that legislation. So from that standpoint, it's my position that the legislation that restricted the elective, being involved in elections is wholly unconstitutional because it is not narrowly tailored to achieve the compelling interest. And I'm confident that it would not pass that compelling interest standard in a court of law.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments?
I have something to say. Sure. Okay. The very nature of the merit board itself is political. Okay, everyone sitting on this board got here because of political choices. They either went in front of the county commission, lobbied to get put on the board, or they were appointed by the mayor's office. Okay, previous board, I'll have to admit there were some problems there, but instead of addressing the individual problems that existed before, which were already a violation, in my opinion, of what was on our rules and regulation, Commissioner Jay, who I applaud what he did in trying to straighten that out and prevent that from going forward, I feel went too far in putting volunteers on the board, locking them out of the political system. This board, along with the county commission, just gave rights to the officers of the sheriff's department now where they can participate in the political system. Before they could not. Well, they could, but they would have to resign, give up their position, and they would, in addition to that, be without their pay and their salary, and a lot of good men and women on the sheriff's department can't afford to do that, to be able to run for political office. So we've now, this board and the county commission has now allowed for these officers to have that right. I just don't feel that locking out volunteer members from being able to participate in the political system is fair and reasonable. And I would go along with what Mr. Valiant said also. That's all I have to say.
I think the only comment that I would make is I don't think that it is a question of whether or not the board can maintain impartiality, but the perception of the officers. If they're gonna feel comfortable enough coming to the board. And I have to wonder if there's not somewhere in the middle, where I think that you guys spoke about, even national and federal elections. I tend to agree with Mr. Manning that maybe it's the sheriff's office and the county commission. Maybe it's limited there.
Can I speak again, please? Sure. I spoke with each one in person or on the phone with the officers who represent the different divisions in the sheriff's department. And I asked them, did they have any complaints or any pushback as to what the merit board was looking at? And the answer was no. Unless something has changed since I spoke with them, they did not have any pushback from the rank and file about what the merit board was doing. And I see a couple of them here in the room right now that I spoke with. Thank you.
Quick comment. So I think that's why I proposed that friendly amendment initially, because I agree with you 100% when you talk about perception. It's not about now. It's also how do we leave it better than the people that's coming behind us. We won't be on the Merit Systems Board for 20, 30 years. So what happens when the political pendulum shifts, whether it's local, state, or federal? So my rationale behind that was saying that, similar to what Commissioner Jay shared, how do we make sure it stays apolitical? How do we make sure we stay a benefit to the officers in the community that we serve without bringing in anything that can muddy decisions or bringing in any type of not feeling supported when it comes to the people that we're supposed to serve, which is our officers. And knowing this body and what we see, what we hear, what we touch is very sensitive information and that impacts the officers directly. If I'm an officer and I can't come to someone that should have my support and also I can feel confident versus knowing that one person's running for county commissioner and this person's running for city commission and whatever, city council, whatever it may be, my perception may be that this person may have their own preconceived notion or their own agenda of what they want to get done for themselves. I'm not saying that that's anybody on this board, but that's just fact. Perceptions outweigh a lot of facts sometimes. So my thoughts were at least if we can meet somewhere in the middle and maybe do an amendment to what was being proposed to make sure we're not impacting local decisions that's being done, whether it's county, city, or anything tied into that. I added in state because state does have an impact. Having time to work with that mayor's office for 5 years for the city of Knoxville, I know how much impact the state can have on our local decisions and also particularly with law enforcement, because I had a chance to work with our former chief, David Rouse, who's now our, of course, director for the TBI, and our former mayor, Matt O'Hara. We worked in Nashville a whole lot. So that's why my proposal was to do a friendly amendment to include those bodies, just to make sure we keep this body in the sense of serving who we're supposed to be serving, the officers, under the jurisdiction of our county commission. So that's why that amendment was proposed for conversation to put that before the board and see if the board or the board chair would be interested in that as far as, that recommendation. So that was something I did bring forward.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just briefly, I think it's very clear that what we're looking at is a couple competing interests, right? It is, what is the best way to serve the officers? And how can we do that in a way that doesn't overly restrict members of the board to partake in their civic duty? I think those are very clearly the competing interests, right? And so I think specifically, Chairman Manning brought up something that was quite interesting, right? It is the board that gives us our power, right, or the board that delegates power to the merit board is specifically the county commissions, right? You could see or draw a line from county commission to merit board to say, maybe that thing might lend itself to a misperception, right? Whereas at a certain point, when you go out to the broader picture, it is how do those things shape the misperception, and even to what degree would that misperception arise if an officer were to come in here and maybe didn't get exactly what they were looking for, right? Would they say, even if it was completely apolitical at the end of the day, that maybe there wasn't something else? I think a lot of people feel that way when they're wronged, or when they feel like they've been wronged. It is, well, the cards are stacked against me, whether that's true or false. So you know, my point to kind of wrap that up is, what is the least restrictive way we can do this to where we can make sure we can continue with our jobs, continue with our duty, continue protecting the officers that serve, and at the same time be able to do our duty as citizens and our own civic duty, and that's not so restricted that we can't partake in any political. I think that might just, the bigger picture is that's probably too much of a line in the sand.
I think, I think that kind of hits the nail on the head with a lot of what I'm saying. I think the line that I'm drawing is specifically the role of the merit council is to protect the officers from, the political activities of the administration. That's spelled out in the merit council rules and procedures. Protect the officers from the political activities of the administration. So from that standpoint, it kind of puts us directly in opposition of the administration. Doesn't put us in opposition of county commission, doesn't put us in opposition of the mayor of Knox County or the mayor of Knoxville City. It doesn't put us in opposition to state senators or federal senators. Right now with the way everything is worded, I think that it would be appropriate to say, okay, even going back to what Mr. J was saying, to say, well, hey, at one point there was a perception that, maybe certain members on this board during that election, during that sheriff's election, were, maybe had some biases or maybe had supported one of the other sheriff candidates. I think at that point, the issue as it's been highlighted was the officers would not come before this board because they did not want to come before a board that could present some bias, or they thought, well, if I'm supporting this candidate or if this, board member is supporting the other candidate, perhaps that could affect me, perhaps that could hurt me. And I think that from that standpoint, it's appropriate, to have the election for Knox County Sheriff mentioned. However, I think going anywhere beyond that is not, and once again, quoting the Supreme Court language, narrowly tailored to support the compelling interest at issue, which, as we've highlighted, is a public policy issue of political involvement in these races and the potential problems with those issues. Now, to my knowledge, this board hasn't been appealed once. This board hasn't been overturned once. And so I think that that's probably a testament unto itself and to our ability to act impartially. So I would think that currently the way that we've had the language drafted, we had the law director's office draft this language 2 or 3 meetings ago. I think it would be appropriate to go forward as is.
Just a quick comment. So you said something about any political involvement. So just recognizing section 4B that outlines as far as involvement in elections or campaigns. However, nothing in this part shall be construed to prohibit or prevent any such board member from becoming or continuing to be a member of a political club or organization and enjoying all the rights and privileges of such membership, or from attending any political meeting. Such board members shall not be denied freedom in casting of a vote. So when you say any, I want to make sure, just for clarification, it's still membership and political involved committees can still do something.
Sure, it was just more or less hyperbole for all the
I
things
understand.
which
I want to make sure I was clear.
Yeah,
Say
right.
any. So, okay.
Any other conversation?
Anyway, I agree with Mr. Marshall that everything in this world is political to a certain degree. And I would agree with Mr. Valiant that constitutionally, I don't know if this would hold up. I do know that we've all taken, as board members, we've raised our hand and taken the oath to do our job. And I trust each and every one of these members to do their job and do it perfectly. And that's sort of what boils down to. We can do all this back and forth, but I feel like how it's stated before is good. And with all the fine board members we have here, I think we can do our job perfectly. I don't even think the ethics board has that type of scrutiny on them to do that. So we're an unpaid board, and I think we're very high character people here, and I think we can continue to do a fantastic job.
Thank you. I got something else to say. No.
Oh, it's okay.
No.
We're getting paid pretty good money right now.
Irregardless of what we decide to do today, we go forward. County Commission is the final say on this matter. Okay, so it's gonna get looked at again. And County Commission will decide whether they agree with what the Merit Board comes up with today. That's it.
Okay. I've already stated my opinion, so there's no reason to reiterate that. So we have a motion to propose an amendment to the rules and regs 3.2F in Knox County Ordinance Section 4253. And in a nutshell, it would only the amendment or the change to the section would be that you would be precluded only from participating in the election of Knox County Sheriff. All other elected positions you would be allowed to participate in the process, campaigning, raising money, so on and so forth. So that is the motion. I need a second on that.
Second?
No, I need a second. Any further discussion? We're gonna do a poll voting on Mr. Vaughn.
Nay.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
No. So is it 4-3?
Yes.
So that's a majority, so it passes, okay? That'll be forwarded to the commission for consideration. Excuse me, next item is motion to propose amendment to Rules and Regs 9.5 in Knox County Ordinance Section 42-62B. And this was the conversation we had where Chief Robles came in and explained to us that this was legislated under a private action by the state legislature. And I asked our law director to provide some bullet point training on us so we understand what a private act is, so we don't get contrary to state law. Mr. Moore.
A private act is a law passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor that applies to one county. That's what a private act is. And so in 1970, the state legislature passed a private act instituting a merit system for just Knox County. That's the private act. After that, that was 1970. In 1974, the state legislature passed an act that applied across the state. It's the County Sheriff's Civil Service Law of 1974 that made sheriff merit systems statewide. Knox County was still under the private act, but the rest of and then that's the first one in the state to do this. And then in 1974, the state law applied to every other county. In 1990, November 8th, 1988, the voters of Knox County voted to adopt home charter rule, a different kind of rule of our governance of our county that became effective September 1st, 1990. In that act, in that charter vote, this private act, among other things, was repealed. So when we voted to impose home charter rule, that private act that installed our merit board, merit council at the time, was null and void. At the same legislative, the first legislative act, first meeting after the home charter rule became effective, the county commission voted to adopt the statewide County Sheriff Civil Service Act of 1974 with some differences. And that's ordinance 090-9-111. So the private act was no longer in effect after the voters voted for charter home rule. Okay? And then one of the first acts, I think probably the first act of the county commission after the charter home rule came into effect, they adopted the county sheriff's the statewide act with some differences. Okay? And so a private act doesn't apply anymore because of the voters in Knox County, among other things, repealed that when they voted for charter home rule.
So this amendment that's been proposed regarding the less than 3 day suspension,
It doesn't violate the law
it
anymore.
doesn't violate the law.
No.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any questions for Mr. Byrd? Does anybody from the audience wish to address this? Okay, hearing none. No comments from any members of the council. We have a motion to propose the amendment as I stated earlier. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Valiant. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. I just want to, that concludes our agenda. And I just want to publicly state how absolutely impressed I am with all of you. And you're here, you're engaged, you're informed. My experience with volunteer-based quasi city or county board has not been this good, and I appreciate it very much. And since our meeting is concluding, I want to offer each of you my best wishes for a great holiday season. I think between now and our next meeting, there'll be 25 holidays. Well, my birthday's in there, okay, so anyway. But I do want to wish all of you a safe, sane, and happy holiday season. I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the new year. And if I can be of any service to any of you, please feel free to contact me. Okay. And we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.